All right. Peace on earth, everybody. It's going down. We got Ricardo and Jason, and we got a little Sunday trialogues. Jason is blessing us with his presence to replace our fearless leader with his other technological skills and wisdom aside from technology as well. So, Ricardo, why don't you break it down for the world? What are you doing lately? How's things?
Sure. Yeah, everything is all right. So, my name is, as Ethan said, is Ricardo Calvari. You can find me on X at Ricardo Calvari1, as it is in the screen. I am working tight with the Institute for Natural Philosophy, and we have this podcast between me and Jason that is called The Shaman and the Philosopher.
Yeah,
Awesome.
we've been pumping that one pretty hard.
Yeah,
So,
Jason,
tell
break it
us, tell
down.
us about yourself.
Hi, Jason Huffman. Screen name, you'll find me Shaman 711, 711. That's 711 underscore on X. On YouTube, same thing. I've got a couple of series I'm working on there. Antediluvian Alabama, where I put forth evidence I found exploring many years here on the ground in North Alabama of a, let's just say, high heat, high energy event in our ancient past associated with the Younger Dryas catastrophe event, in my opinion. So there's Antediluvian Alabama, and then there's Finding Mabilla, where I began this sort of odyssey I took myself upon discovering our history with finding the site of the Battle of Mabilla. And then all sort of corresponding data necessary to further map out the route of Fernando de Soto through this area. So that's my shtick. Mainly what I've been working on recently is, as Ricardo said, The Shaman and the Philosopher. It's a podcast that just sort of got birthed from Ricardo and I. Funny enough, we were talking about Dan Richards before we started recording, and Dan was a scheduled guest for the UU crew, and he had some family emergency, and Dan's a family man, and he had to tend to that. And Ricardo and I were already in the studio. So we're like, well, let's not waste the time, right? And I think we did about 2.5 hours talking about my work and your work. And we said, this is a podcast, right here. And we quickly then had to start going, okay, well, who are we going to speak to? And so we started reaching out to guests that we had already, mostly Ricardo through his work with the Institute, had already sort of pinged on as independent researchers, right? Who were, doing their thing to bring forward data about the truth of our history, our story here on Earth. And so that's sort of the vein we've been taking. And most recently, and I'll wrap with this, we wanted to look into Mars, right? I had seen John Ward from South Africa. I'd seen him on Mike and Dave's show, and I had so much fun with it. So I was like, we've got to talk to this dude. And Ricardo thought I meant Brian Corey Dobbs, blessedly, as Ricardo says, coincidence takes planning, right? And so Brian Corey Dobbs introduced us to this Mars, part of the story of our history here on Earth, funny enough. And we're getting to do a deep dive next week with Sean Ward into his work on looking at anomalies on Mars. So it's quite an adventure that's unfolding, and we're taking a lot of turns with it. So yeah, that's where my time's been going, is sitting across with this dude, and I'm just honored that I got asked to sit here and sort of be hopefully a contributing third wheel. It's Sunday morning, and I was yanked out of Sunday morning by Ricardo just a few minutes ago to ask to fill in here.
Well, all the good people were otherwise engaged, so
Of
we'll
course,
stop with
of
you.
course. Otherwise, why would you want this dude, on the screen? What is all that shit behind him? Is that a skull and fucking native artifacts? What does he do? Anyway, I'm honored to be plopping down here with my tea instead of on the back porch. Thanks, guys.
Can you?
That's me.
That's awesome, man. I really appreciate you being here, and I hope everyone else does. What led you to look into the event, the catastrophic, if you will, event?
So I start with Mabilla, man, and I start. Once I realized mainstream doesn't really want to hear, what I found after I found the metal and the corresponding burial mounds and the mounds being destroyed by construction, right? I start studying the map and mapping out DeSoto, and I find this earthwork, man, that cannot be explained by traditional narrative. Its size and scope was just so huge, right? and it looks like a winged serpent. Now, I'd already been studying, reading up, boning up on Graham Hancock, right? So my eyes were getting opened to this sort of worldwide tradition, especially with these winged serpents, to what that meant, the comets in the sky. Life takes me up to central Alabama. And I mentioned the mound part because you got to see I'm still in mound sort of, mindset when I get up on this river in central Alabama, the Cahaba. And I study the satellite images, and I see a green triangle perfectly matches the triangle of the river like a fucking arrow, like drawn. And now all around it is the trees of different colors, deciduous, as I learned by getting there on the ground, right? And so I'm going, why is this green triangle of pines in this deciduous forest? So I jump in, Ethan, in the river, and I cross it, and I start walking up to this giant mound that's in front of me. That's what my brain says. Look, huge native mound. Only problem is there's rocks and boulders, blown all over this river. Its walls are 60 feet high, right? The cliffs. And you look, and there's this giant boulder, man, the size of a car, and it's stuck into the hill, and you look up, and there's nowhere it came from, right? Some force blew it into this hill, right? You have this real sense of standing in rubble, right? So as I'm approaching this, my mind's going, it's native mound, native mound. I'm like, happy barefoot, fucking trekking, not worrying what I'm stepping in. And dude, I get close enough and I like hit my toe and it's a rock, and I'm looking at that thing and it's kind of lumps sticking out on underneath it. And I get closer and I realize this mound is not earth. It's giant from the size of the room I'm in to this size pile of rubble, right? That is the same. I call it rubble. I don't, because that's the sense you have when you're there. And that was my sort of entree. I'll wrap this bit up, dude, with I get on top of this thing, and indeed, it is all rock, right? The reason the conifers are on top is because dude, you get up there and they're all like this big around. They can't get tap roots, right? And they keep falling over because it's all rock, right? I explore this thing, and on the edge of it, I find a giant rock sticking out, big triangular, and I see a full half of what my mind knew as drill hole from having studied megalithic construction around the world, right? Not by going, but by studying the work of other people. You see this phenomenon, especially in sort of the oldest stones in Egypt, of these drill holes, which looks like core drill bits, right? In this rock. I knew what I'd had at that point, and then I started exploring the whole area around Hoover. You go to Mountain Brook, man, this giant neighborhood full of fucking mansions like Beverly Hills shit, right? But in everybody's yard are these giant boulders, man. And you go and you look under the boulder and you're like, that's a fucking groove. That's part of a face, right? And you see how I could go on from this. Let me wrap it with this. I then follow this debris, dude, this large debris field all the way up to North Alabama, where when I start exploring up there, remember, I began on this mound of this rubble, obviously man-made. I mean, somebody came back here after this shit was blown up, right? I get up to North Alabama and I start finding these anomalies. If you find me on YouTube, you'll see the picture on my profile of these circular metal deposits. Deposits is the only word you can use with our current narrative, right? But they look like core drill bits or some shit. They're like this big. And you start traipsing all around the woods as I do, and you start finding these things in other rocks, down the hill. And you start looking around going, I'm in a fucking debris field. And these rocks are full of metal. And then you get in on these rocks, dude, and you go, what type of stone is this? And you look at it, and I do it in all my videos. It's just nothing but these tiny quartz pebbles, right? Like if you look at modern day concrete, go outside. If you look at any concrete made more than, 20, 30 years ago, it's all pebbles in a matrix. That's what all of this stone is, right? So there's my best attempt, Ethan, at putting about 5 years on the ground into 5 minutes or less for you, bro. Antediluvian Alabama is where you can see all of that work. Yeah.
5 minutes. We've been here for 2 hours.
Super cool.
My tea. I told you I put 2 tea bags in this morning, dude. So Ricardo's like, "Can you hop on and talk?" I'm like, "Oh God, I gotta do 2 tea bags now."
It's
So
fascinating.
evidence of what I believe is something, a former epoch of mankind. That all of our narratives, if we listen to I mean, here in this country, we know the Christian Bible, tells us about a former epoch of time wiped out by destruction. If you listen to Graham Hancock or anybody associated with him, you're going to find worldwide evidence of the same thing from cultures all around the world, right? Well, with all of that foreknowledge, I couldn't help but see that what I was in was remnants of whatever the fuck they had going on, when all of those airbursts hit. And from the younger Dryas. And then just this year with the research of guys like Mark Young, you've got evidence of airbursts, over here in Louisiana, right fucking that way, and then here I stand on all this evidence of, at bare minimum, high heat, high energy event. Something melted all this fucking metal and this rock, and something blew this stuff everywhere. And airbursts are
one thing they often they'll stick
Ethan.
with their they'll stick with their narrative, but what is one thing that they will admit, that humans have a really shallow sense of time, right? And on top of that, things don't generally change nice and slowly, like we would imagine a heating pool. Things just like go suddenly a different direction, right? Or suddenly drastically different in the case that you're exploring. So I think they will admit that things do change drastically, and we have a shallow sense of time. So
I think
they don't like catastrophism, and Ricardo, our buddy Rubate, very good friend of the show, put out one of his, you call them memes, but they're sort of, drawings the other day, where it says it perfectly in this image. You've got human being sort of looking like a Neanderthal or whatever, and modern human being with a building, like a brand new, downtown bank or something, right? And in the middle is a question that same brain, right here. Same brain only did this the last 6,000 years. Why did I only do this for the previous 800,000? It doesn't make sense when you try to look.
It reminds me of how they call modern day agriculture conventional. It's not the convention at all, right? The convention is organic farming.
That's not the dude. They just passed this week. What was it? New glyphosate BS that they're allowed forever chemicals that they're allowed to spray on our food.
I saw it for sure, right? Even
and we've got overproduction of every damn thing. So what is it we're trying to achieve? The crops are perfect. I mean, what's the problem that I need new forever chemicals?
More. That's the problem.
Everybody wants more. The chemical company makes money. They get more, right? They already don't give a fuck about me and my food supply, right? So that's automatically out of the equation. So all they see is more.
It's more.
Right? Yeah, it's more for them, less for me. Now I got to go to the trouble of finding somebody around here that grows fucking corn and doesn't use commercial products, which thankfully for me, there are those people, but that's not a standard option,
Well, I think the problem in the States is that if things haven't changed in the last 20 years, there is a limit to the fine that any company can pay. And so the profits are 100 times more than the value of the fine per day. So they don't mind paying the fine every single day and keep up with the profits. Because if they are forced to do things without, for instance, companies that pollute rivers, they prefer to pay that amount every single day of fine than to millions and millions investing in materials and technologies that will allow them not to pollute the river. So in the end is all accountants' decision, because it's a matter of money.
It is. Life has become a spreadsheet. We talk about my experience, Ethan. I spent time managing, I don't want to get anybody in trouble here. So let's just say a retail organization known for fast growth that if I mentioned, everybody would be familiar with, okay? I spent time managing one of their locations, all right? I learned this real quick. I'm there on the ground, and they'll only allow you part-time employees, right, when you're managing this place. Now, anybody that's ever managed anywhere knows that is immediately a problem, right? Because the people that take part-time jobs, they all have their energy, passion, and everything invested somewhere else, right? They need to go see a concert next week or what the hell ever, their little expenses are. they show up to like get through the shift, right? Now you try to raise your hand to anyone above you, right? And go, I need to get to the dude designing the fucking spreadsheets. I've designed them, right? I know how to grow companies, and this shit's not gonna work, right? And you just banging your head against the wall, and you can't help but suddenly realize, oh, I see. You don't give a shit about people. You don't give a shit about whether or not this individual location
No, it's all
works.
a matter of
You've got a
profit.
bare minimum, everything mediocrity, and all profit. And society has begun to structure itself completely that way.
Look, when we change the work, when the work changed from professionalism and efficiency to objectives that has to be accomplished, and most of the time those objectives go against the two first rules because it forces you to bend corners and in order to fulfill the objectives that you have established. So once you go for objectives, you are eliminating the human factor, you are eliminating a good work because it's all concentrated on get to the deadline and have those objectives accomplished, right? And then you have those people that understand that if they overachieved over those objectives, they immediately grow into the company, no matter how many people they stepped in to go there, right? Because that doesn't affect the company at all. If this employee is unsatisfied, just bring another one, and if it isn't proper, we bring another one that can do what the previous one didn't. So the human factor is completely reduced to nothing. It's just a matter of fulfilling every single day or 15-day or a month's objectives, right? So it's
You
like
can't.
it's like the police. They receive I think this is so absurd. They receive the value of the fines in Portugal, right, is included in the budget of the state that is produced before the year begins. So this means
Yeah.
that they have to fine
Uh-huh.
that amount of people
Uh-huh.
to fulfill the objectives of the budget that was prepared by the government, right?
Uh-huh.
So each time the month
And
is not going accordingly, when people are doing orderly driving or whatever, right? They send all the people into the street and they start finding every people that they can until the
Oh,
objective is
God.
done,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because it's included in the
Regulating
budget,
logic.
so they have to achieve that value, right? So this
Wow.
is not serving the people, this is just numbers again. So it's the same in the government as it is in a company. It's all a business. So
Well, it's a business, but look, man, there's businesses that don't forget the human element, right? How can you expect in any human society? Hi, welcome. That's what we're fucking trying to do here, right? How can you expect any element of a human society that has ruled out the human element to 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 be successful in a human society? It's lunacy, right? Ethan, we were talking before we got going. I mentioned a company with negative experience. I've got lots of business experience, and there was one upstart company that had a different philosophy, right? They got very successful, and it's how this guy made it on the team, right? They said the philosophy is like this. They said, look, I'm going to look at you, and I'm going to know I want you on my bus, right? I don't know what seat on the bus, right? But I know there's something in you, the human entity, the individual. There's something in you that you can offer to this enterprise of mine, right? There's like you put them on the bus, and then you just keep going, right? And sooner or later, during the course of the ride, right, that person's qualities and character further refine and reveal themselves, and you know where to put them on the seat. Now that is a business model that completely geared itself towards the human, right? Because as any common sense person you think would know, is I got to run with people, I got to run on people, and I got to be geared towards people. And if I'm not, I'm doomed to, I don't know if they fail or succeed, man, but I know they're fucking us up, trying it the other way.
well, one of the things that we try to do, and we can only speak for ourselves here in the institute, and we had some problems with some people with that. We lost some people because of that. That is, people come to us wishing to do something, right? And it is our mode to, instead of saying you're going to do this, we always ask, what do you want to do? What are your interests, right? And then people say, uh, uh, So you don't have an interest, you don't have something that you like to achieve, you don't have a project, an idea. No, I was told what to do. Well, well, people that know what have to do is what we already have. We need people to bring new ideas, new projects, new concepts to, and each time, and even people that agreed to follow and create something, in the end, it turns out that they just can't, because they don't understand the concept of managing something that is their own. Most people want to be driven, told what to do, instead of being creative and then debate what they created.
Right.
So
Uh,
Well, and
imagine
when
in
it works,
society,
when
we
it
are a
works well, it
small
works well.
organization. Now imagine society, right? So
There are, like you say, and we'll let Ethan keep going, but just to wrap up, since you reminded me we're on official capacity here, Ricardo, with the Institute, is that, look, look at me as your paradigm of hope, okay? Ricardo found me and he approached me as just he says he does, right? And that's how I knew I wanted to hang out with this dude and see what he had going on. Was he was just as genuine as he says. And look, to your point, independent researchers, we say independent for a reason. Generally, by the time they found us, you're like me, you're like Vince Barrows, you're like any of these other long lists of guests we've had so far that have gotten where they've gotten with a certain amount of passion and a certain amount of self-drive, mainly because the topics we cover are generally regarded as something to act offensively towards by the mainstream narrative gatekeepers, right? So these people show up and they're already a little battle scarred, and they're very self-driven, it's like old Vince. Vince been in a shootout so long, sometimes he doesn't know, whether or not. But you look at that man, and he's so beautiful, with his research and his approach and his willingness to take whatever opportunity was given him, and just go with it. I could go on and on about Vince and
yeah,
each one of our individual
I think I
guests.
think
Just to drive home your point, Ricardo,
yeah,
is
I
that's
think
what we're looking for.
this leads into what I brought for today. It's not the chaos of society, but it's chaos in general.
Perfect.
Uh, so if you indulge me, I will give you three little chapters.
Showtime.
Okay, so it's entitled "Misunderstanding Chaos Reality: A Failure of Perception," and it goes like this. Our misunderstanding of chaos reality stems from a failure to grasp its level of organization. We label chaos as chaotic because its complexity exceeds our cognitive limits. The human brain evolved to recognize simple patterns, struggles with systems where small inputs yield vast outputs. In a 1999 study from Psychological Review, researchers found that humans can predict linear patterns but falter with nonlinear chaotic systems, perceiving them as random. Yet chaos is not random, it's deterministic, as Lorentz equations show, with every outcome traceable to precise initial conditions. So, philosophically, this misunderstanding echoes ancient views. The Greek philosopher Heraclius, about 500 BC, saw chaos as the source of all things, declaring, "From chaos comes order." Modern science aligns with this, revealing chaos as a breach between order and disorder. In ecology, chaotic predator prey dynamics, like those modeled by the Lotka Volterra equations, maintain ecosystem stability through precise fluctuations. A 2015 study in Ecology Letters showed how chaotic population cycles in lynx and hare prevent extinction, a balance that appears disordered but is mathematically exact. So culturally, chaos is often demonized as anarchy, yet many traditions revere its complexity. In Taoism, and this is for you, Ethan, in Taoism, the concept of Wu Wei, non-action, embraces the natural flow of chaos, seeing it as harmonious order. As Lao Tzu writes in the Tao Te Ching, circa 4400 BC, the Tao moves by returning in a circle. Chaos births order. This perspective sees chaos not as disorder, but as a complex organization misunderstood by those who cannot see its precision. So I stand in awe of chaos, not as force of disorder, but as immaculate precision that shapes our existence. I see that we exist not because chaos is chaotic and aleatory, but because its precision orchestrates the delicate balance of reality. If chaos were a product of trial and error, reality as we know it would not exist. Trial and error implies a hazard process, a fumbling through possibilities where mistakes accumulate, leading to collapse. At the quantum level, such a method would spell disaster. Matter would destabilize, particles would scatter chaotically, unable to form the stable structures of atoms, molecules, and ultimately life. The delicate dance of quarks and electrons, governed by the precise laws of quantum mechanics, would unravel, leaving nothing but a void where reality should be. Instead, I observe that all elements at the quantum level seem to operate in a hive mind system, as a conscious, each reacting instantly to the others. Quantum entanglement, a phenomenon where particles remain connected across vast distances, exemplifies this. A 2015 experiment at Delft University confirmed that entangled particles, when measured, instantly affect each other's state, defying classical notions of space and time. This instantaneous reaction ensures, whoa, I lost myself, that the veil of reality is never broken, maintaining a coherent, entangled whole. The precision of chaos at this level is not a clumsy trial and error process, but a synchronized symphony, where every particle plays its part with exactitude, ensuring stability of atoms, the formation of matter, and the emergence of the universe we inhabit. In human systems, chaos is a driving innovation with similar precision. The Internet, a chaotic network of billions of nodes, self organized through protocols like TCP IP, ensuring data packets find their path with exactitude. A 2020 study in Nature Communications on Social Networks show how chaotic interactions lead to predictable patterns of influence, a precision that shapes our digital reality. Chaos, far from trial and error, operates with immaculate precision as every chaotic system, from the quantum realm to the web, follows deterministic rules that allow order to emerge. I'm about to finish. So, chaos is not the chaotic disorder we imagine, but a complex form of organization, misunderstood due to its intricate precision. Chaos theory organization reveals systems where small changes yield vast outcomes. Yet every step follows deterministic rules, complex systems precision, from the universe fine-tuned origins to biological evolution. This all shows chaos as a generative force, crafting reality with exactitude. Our misunderstanding of chaos reality stems from our limited perception. Yet science and philosophy reveal its immaculate design. So, as I said, at a quantum level, chaos ensures coherence through a hive mind light system, where particles react instantly, maintaining reality entangled fabric. So, as we gaze into the swirling dance of the cosmos, chaos is not a disorder but a symphony of immaculate precision, where every note, though complex, plays its part in the music that creates our existence. Thank you for indulging me this far.
I I don't think we were indulging you, Ricardo. You were indulging us. That was really quite beautiful. I'm going to let Ethan go while I get my thoughts on that, but I do want to make one point, Ricardo, and that's this, as to what I have to say about that. I got one note in, man, and I got it during like your first paragraph. Okay, so I want you to just deal with the note I had before you got past your first paragraph. Right? Chaos by human standards is letting go and letting God, right? Where we see anarchy, he's seeing order and a free palette with which to work in. You know, if anybody asks me honestly how I got in this chair talking to you dudes with what I've got behind me, and all around me, I can have but one answer, and that's one day at a time, trusting the chaos, right? Not taking my signs and signals from any external cues whatsoever, because I was tied to, as you alluded to, Ricardo, something slightly higher than our standard five senses, right? And so I knew how to read in that chaos a divine order. And once I began to show a little trust in that, I began to see that I could also walk with it, right? And then learn to orient and work with. But it's only through accepting what we term chaos that you can glimpse what you just put into words so perfectly. is that it's in that space that order can reveal itself to you.
Sure, because either you oppose
Beautiful.
it, either you oppose it,
Hmm.
or you actually flow with it. So
Okay.
instead of thinking it as completely insane or understandable or not understandable, you just accept it
Go with it.
and go through its meanders, right? Instead of seeing a complexity of past in front of you, you just feel your way and follow the road, whatever it is that you step onto. So
Ricardo, here's one shamanic moment. It just popped in my head. I said I wasn't going to share, but shit, it's popping in my head. Look, when I first started accessing these higher levels of consciousness, right? What it breaks down to on the ground is a dude researching and developing this shit, right? That means you're leaning into it, right? And so I'm standing out on my back porch here outside my old office, and I've got a tape recorder, right? Because I'm destined at this point, that I'm gonna try to record this process. And where I start going, right, my eyes are looking at woods, but what I see before me and when I start to let myself breathe into it is infinite possibility. I first learned this little consciousness rise trick looking at a rock, a particular rock in the woods, right? And it was all jaded and had all these little, I was trying to see if they were human etch marks, in it. But when you looked real close in it, if you let yourself disengage a touch, you could be looking at a model of Venus, right? You see where I'm going, like a clay model of something else right down there in that tiny micro. Okay. So I was experimenting with breathing in, seeing the macro from that perspective one day. And if you listen to the tape recording afterwards, all you get is this. And I'm looking at the woods and you hear me breathing deep, trying to like hold on to what I'm seeing before me, because what's unfolding before me is something we're not accustomed to seeing. It's that in everything is possibility when you're seeing it from that higher objective where God, creator would see it from, right? Even in the leaves and in the trees are infinite worlds if you'll just, let your third eye sort of go there for a second. And yeah, you just hear me struggling. Like, I can't hold it.
the
Because
neighborhood that has guests, they was asking, "You have bears here?" No, no, no. We just have that
what's
crazy
he
guy
trying to
breathing in
hold
the
on
woods.
to over there? What the hell's he doing? But I was trying to hold on. I was trying to integrate that infinite possibility with sort of my standard, no, the trees are just trees, concrete consciousness we try to walk around with. So yeah, so even where we see order is disorder. That's the trick. The what we perceive as order is complete and total disorder, right? From we would define it as such if we really could look at it. You get down to the atoms and the quarks and just a bunch of shit bouncing all over the goddamn place. You know what I'm saying? So from our perspective, if we were trying to look at anything, it's chaotic, right?
Well, I
And
think I think
we are forced to perceive it, and it's go ahead.
I think, and Ethan can follow up on this. I think that what we perceive as non-chaotic is just a piece of reality that our senses allow us to make sense of, right? Senses, sense of, right? But it's all equally chaotic because even the things that we consider to be real and physical are based on this chaotic system. So that's why I say it's all a matter of perception.
Yeah, and I think that chaos is something that relates to the whole idea of a Buddhist monk or a Taoist monk being in a balanced mode to where he's not, or the person is not upset when things are greatly alarming, nor are they greatly elated when things are super happy, right?
Moved by
Wu Wei
tragedy or
is
tragedy or treasure. Moves neither
right,
by
right.
tragedy or treasure. Yes.
And a simple way to understand Wu Wei is, I imagine visually anyway, is farming by a river. You wouldn't. It's the river might change where it is, so you don't insist on being in the same place that you were last year that is now flooded or that is now dry. You move along with the chaos so that there is no poor effect by the chaos. You wouldn't try to plant things in the winter, unless that's that plant's orientation and you're doing it in a manner that's appropriate, right? Like there's certain ways to do things that make chaos just align and work for you, which is Wu Wei. And in a martial arts kind of sense, there's this chaos of a battle, where every move by your opposition presents an opening to your opposition, right? And there is the ancient Chinese saying, in chaos, there is opportunity, which also reflects really the Western basis of chaos, whether we know it or not, which is Set, right? And Set is the evildoer often enough in the Egyptian storyline. But he is chaos, and that's why he's noted to be the bad guy. But is he bad? No, he's not necessarily bad. He's
Loki.
chaotic. And like Loki, one of the symbols that is used, one of the hieroglyphic tools for Set is the plow. And so the plow sets forth a chaotic line in the soil to plant, right? And this is chaos to the field, right? So is flooding, right? The which is the other, famous way that Egypt became so agriculturally rich and thus had time to do things other than think about where they're going to get their next meal, for instance, right? So the chaos of the flood that they learned to control, or at least deal with properly in a Wu Wei manner, that was all the ebb and flow of chaos and tapping in, like the whole overall message there, Ricardo.
Yeah, but that leads me to a question, Ethan and Jason. Do you believe that humans would congregate by the hundreds of thousands or by the millions if not driven into that?
Well, there's a story, I forget exactly, an analogy, that is about a fisherman and a guy that's been living in a city of millions finally gets a break, and he gets to go travel to island where people are living a more simple life, and he's doing his thing. He's been dreaming about doing this for decades, going fishing and hanging out on the island with beautiful women and no complexity of the inner city. And he meets a fisherman and he gets to know this fisherman's pattern. And one day he sees the fisherman hanging out on the beach. It's a beautiful day, and the guy is walking along the beach. He crosses the fisherman's path. Hey, what are you doing, man? How you doing? Oh, I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day. I'm just relaxing. And he's like, well, why aren't you fishing? He's like, well, I already went fishing. He's like, oh, well, you already went fishing, but you could be fishing more. Why aren't you fishing more? If you were to fish more, then you could have more money. Then you could buy a boat. And then if you had another boat, you could catch more fish. And then you could have a whole lot more money. And then you could kick back on the beach where you're your own boss and you didn't have to work that much. And he says, wait, that's what I'm doing right now.
Thanks for describing my operation, man. I'm glad you noticed what I had going on here. Folks didn't seem to notice. You're bright.
So the guy, he just works a little. He works enough as is needed to accommodate himself and his family, and then he relaxes on the beach. But the complexity aspect would be, oh, I gotta hustle in the city for 20 years and do this and that. I think we've lost our sense of what really is happiness. Happiness, it sounds like having, but it's not having. It's not the pursuit of materialism, right? It's just being able to sit on a beach and not be bothered with a million other people chasing their often not compassionate dreams, right? So I don't know if
Yeah,
that answers Ricardo,
yeah,
but
but we live in a time of restlessness. So if you go to the average person in the street and you say, "Look, we are offering 2 hours on top of a rock to see the sunrise or the sunset in this beautiful location," right? How many people would look at you like, "Are you a weirdo? What's going on here?" Because people don't see that as a good use of their time.
Well,
mm,
they don't, and that's to the heart of your question, I guess, is it not, Ricardo? Is, what is this external force? The dude on the beach analogy, right, works great because without an external force telling him to require more, he finds that all the needs which that system, which would tell him if he'd tune in that he requires more, he's got all the needs which they're trying to promise him in the end already, right? So right there we see the fallacy of adhering to that narrative, but that doesn't do away with the question, do people just do that? Look, I tried living in the city. I moved to New York City. I went to acting school in New York City. Way back, I watched September 11th from my rooftop in Queens, right? Just a few miles away. I tried city, and it sums up like this, dude. You leave. I live in Alabama now. I got creeks and all this shit that I now obviously live in, right? And but you don't have those eyes, man. At 18, right? When I hopped the train with $2,000 and no plan, but being pulled towards this group of fucking sorted out too, bro. you know? Peter O'Toole style too. I used his autobiography as sort of my roadmap, and it panned out the way I wanted it to. I wanted it to go so far till I knew I had things to learn. Right, once you get to really examining yourself, especially where, man, in that city, dude, you got to realize once you're trying to focus on you in any way whatsoever, you've got to realize at no point in your day are you more than 20 feet away from any other fucking human being, right? At any point, it's just overwhelming to the sense that I remember flying home. I come home like once every year and a half, and I'd get fucking reverse vertigo from all the openness, you know, because I just was not used to seeing more than 2 blocks in front of me, So I got here where there's no buildings, and I'd be dizzy. I couldn't drive home, and I'd get in these creeks, after I moved back. And I remember specifically, man, I was walking through the creeks, and I was looking up, and I was going, "What the fuck were you thinking? What were you thinking that you thought that city was, the place to be, right?" But before I went and tried it, I couldn't have seen all that. So,
Well,
um,
that reminds me of, there is this Europe tourism uh, preference of, we gotta go to New York. It's a place I gotta go and see. It's New York, New York. And I always tell people, what's the fun in looking into buildings? Because that's all there is.
yeah,
It's just tall buildings.
right, and
You
and
won't see a mountain, you won't see the sky, you won't see nothing. It's the
right,
noise of the cars, it's the confusion of the people, it's street vending, it's screaming, it's crime. How would I change the money that costs to go to New York to go to a place that is actual peaceful,
it makes no sense. It
right?
really doesn't.
But
It
people are attracted to that. But my point is, when I made that question before, is I still, until I got better evidence or information, I'm still convinced that humanity, if taught to evolve, and that would be the explanation why we kept a million of years as we were, and all of a sudden we decided to build computers and spaceships, uh, is that we were led by
all this
two,
metal together in weird ways, and
yeah,
it'll talk back to us. Look, magic. Yeah,
we're pulled by two different types of teachings, which that's why I call part of this group as the teachers and the other part of the slavers. And when we look at the archaeological record, we find that the teachers, if they can be classified as such, we find these places where all of the houses are equal. There is small but very evolved, very technological agricultural developments in places where most of the time we shouldn't be able to do agriculture there if there weren't this knowledge. But they are small communities with no apparent leader. right? And we see this from the megalithic world to the sites in Peru or South America or all around the world, where you find that everybody lived the same. Even before the Empire of Summer, that's how they lived, right? So, and all of a sudden, you start seeing the other side, which I call the slavers. Not that they are necessary slavers, but if we think about our system, we are still slaves today. But
Yeah, they didn't
and
abolish slavery; they just applied it to everyone.
sure, and when we look at the sites of this other kind that I call the slavers, you find places like Angkor Wat that are vast palaces that are pointy and shaggy, almost like Mordor like,
Mm,
right? And enormous fields of agriculture, enormous constructions to drive water into the fields, and millions of people working just to feed this palace,
right.
basically, right? There is this disparity of control of information, of control of money, of quality of life, right? And this is are the people that I call the slavers. And if you go to Egypt, we can consider that, because there is this, first there were the god kings, then there was the son of the gods,
Mm.
and until finally the Ptolemaic system came in, and they become just people, just humans, because the
So
gods were completely removed into the esoteric and to religious terms.
your
So
slavers and teachers is very much. I mean, you're describing light and dark. We could sort of frame this from any of those aspects. It sounds like to me, right? The good impulse, the bad impulse, even good versus evil, right? And what is that opposing force that steps in, right? That drive that makes us look. They're going to use fear. Okay, they're going to use fear. They're going to use making us think about tomorrow, right? Let's get us back to the chaos. All that the slavers, to use your terms, are offering us is basically they're manipulating the chaos. They're making us afraid of it. They're making us realize we have to think way down the road, while at the same time they're making us afraid of not having enough for now, or let alone down the road, right? So we're in this perpetual, we feel safe in the chaos, but they're manipulating that in order to keep dragging us where they want through the chaos, right? Now we get back to the chaos not being chaotic and us not needing them. What do we get back to? What that brings me back to is why God said, what'd you say, Ricardo? Senses make sense of
yeah,
things, right? And God described himself, at least in the Christian Bible, as this. He said, I'm the great I am, right? Okay, that tells me he's not the great I was, he's not the great I will be. So if I'm going to look for that, whatever words you want to use, right? That connection, I'm not going to look tomorrow, I'm not going to look yesterday, I'm going to look now. And now we're into all the Buddhists and where everybody wants to get to now, right? Because that's where God is, right? And that gets me back to my experience, which taught me one day at a time, there is plan, right? What I interpret as chaos is not chaos. Um, yeah, sorry, Ricardo. My brain's spinning on your question, man.
no,
It reminds me the
go ahead.
idea of there being the enslaved and the enslavers reminds me, of course, of the allegory of the cave, which there are the four, Ricardo. There's the slave that gets out, right? The freed prisoner, and then there's his captors, and then there's the people that stay looking at the shadows on the wall, the chained and unchained. There's also this modern day kind of iteration of this slavers and enslaved mental slaves, right? Like that's the real difficulty when we're so mediated that, hey, you know what? I grew up, all I wanted to do was be in New York City.
Right,
Why? Because I was mediated as fuck by
right.
movies and television shows
Yep,
that said it was the coolest place and so on and so forth. I lived there for a number of years too. I'm glad that I did. I learned a lot, but I don't want
right.
to. Are you crazy? Would not want to be there now. But yeah, why did I want to be there at all? Because I was a mediated fool by all these little. We don't even realize that
We
they're
defer our agency
like adding
totally.
a pen. deferring our agency by adding little appendages to how we think. As you brought up earlier, I was thinking about the idea time is money. Well, that's not really fucking true at all.
Not
I
at
mean,
all.
there's some truth to it in some mannerism of some thinking
On your
along some lines,
spreadsheet, maybe.
type of thing. But like, no, it's not. There's all these little slogans that implore us to
Subvert
work
getting
harder
our
and be with,
If time is
yeah, just,
anything, if time is anything, I would say that time is experience, and it's how you choose
Yeah.
those
that's
experiences that
a much more
determines.
valid slogan for sure.
Yeah. Well, when everything is about experience and everything's a win is the first plus to adopting that philosophy, you know. But then it leads all the navigation up to, let's just higher power, whatever the great force that put this show together, we're all involved in, you know. Yeah, that's all. And when so we defer agency to all of these other things, and it's a matrix. It's another word we could use from our lexicon, right? And we then by default defer agency to that, you know. When any spiritual tradition, you know, you hear I lean towards Christian, though shamanic, you know, heavy understanding of it, right? But any spiritual tradition tells you that if you're going to release, first of all, don't release agency, take your agency, right? Any philosophical tradition, any spiritual tradition worth its salt tells you first, you know, Nietzsche and his thou shalt, go to the desert and slay that dragon of thou shalt, right? First, take your fucking agency, right? Do that. Then come out as a kid and come talk to me about reality, right? Because then you're at baseline reality when you get rid of taking in into account all of these thou shouts or these commandments that we defer agency to in order to participate in this system, right? And we're all scared to do that at first. We're like, oh no, but the system's keeping me safe, you know, whatever it is that keeps humans in this mechanism, right? But we get on to what Ricardo started with once we step outside that mechanism, you know. The native lore says it this way: a young man was getting ready to set out on his journey, and the old chief was giving him advice, and he had this to say to him, paraphrasing. He said, at some point on your journey, you're going to come to an exceptionally large pit. He said, now I'm talking a pit so deep you can't see the bottom, so wide you can't get around it. There's just no option. You're going to have to jump, or you're going to have to turn around and come home. The little boy says, well, what should I do? And the old man says, jump. Right? You know, it's all about stepping outside. And then the modern philosopher put it this way. He said, once we jump, we find we land on a feather bed, you know, and that is the order that is behind the apparent chaos. Joseph Campbell liked to say the dragon, you know, the dragon, the cave that holds the dragon is the cave that holds the treasure you seek, you know. All of these are alluding to and telling us the same thing, right? Once we step outside of this false control mechanism that has us believing we're safe in the chaos, right? What it's really doing is insulating us from the reality, right? Which is over here. And if we're willing to just step out into that reality and work with it, we find we've been lied to a lot. And we find that it was with good reason, because they don't want people with agency, because people with agency don't participate in the things we're talking about. The
I
things
think
that
it's the poor value that humanity gives to here and now. It's
correct.
much more obsessed with the past and with the future. And
Fear.
you spoke of Joseph Campbell, and Joseph Campbell is the major inspiration for George Lucas to create Star Wars. And there is this small interaction between Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan, when Obi-Wan tells him, because he's thinking about the future, and Obi-Wan censors him for being obsessed with the future, and and uh, and Obi-Wan answers him, but Master Yoda says I must be mindful of the future. And Qui-Gon Jinn replies to him, not at the expense of the present. So, and I always memorize that because it's a very important lesson to me. The future is important. The past is important because the past is the lessons that allow you now to formulate your future. So
It's the
I,
lesson in so many ways, Ricardo. It's not just a good lesson for you. I mean, it is the lesson, bro, in many ways. Go ahead, Ethan.
I'm reminded of another analogy from a guy on the beach. So I maybe just am in need of a vacation. Maybe it's pertinent. I don't
Beach is 2 hours
know.
south of me, bro. Just let me know when you need to.
Yeah. So there is a guy walking on the beach, and he comes across a group of sandflies, and they're moving along in chaos, and they're just jumping around and hopping and doing all these things. And he walks by, and he's like, "Wow, they just spend a day or two living, and they're just like going crazy. Like, how do they exist that way?" On his way back, he stops, and on observation, they're living a whole sandfly city life. They got like different relationships with each other, and they're doing different things. They're not just hopping around. That was because of him. And so sometimes we just need to shut up. We make deductions on things, but past or future or present, or totally false projection by way of one or another thing, right? And so we just need to like stop, breathe. I mean, it sounds redundant and cliched, but it
For a
really is.
reason.
Yeah, it's just very revelatory. I was going to bring up the thing I was going to bring up today totally relates to, of course, because we're batting 100% as far as the things that we bring to the table relating. I was going to bring up neuro-linguistic programming.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with this, but it basically uses language and posturing and communication skills to enhance your convincing qualities of your message. There is also, I would say, there's kind of dark NLP, which I promised I won't get into politics specifically, but I'll just use broadly the examples of this being perpetuated. But first, let me just say, this guy on YouTube, and he's got a whole thing going on in LA. He's quite amazing. He introduced me to neuro-linguistic programming in combination with face reading, and he's also, quite the neophyte, if you will, or adept in many different things. Actually, is what I meant to say. And his name is Dr. David Snyder. I recommend him. He's the one who exposed me to this idea originally. One of the and he's really interesting, and he brings together, not necessarily together, but has the teachings of neuro-linguistic programming, and also face reading, which is a Chinese tradition. So he kind of brings East and West together in those two studies alone. So one of the most effective and least noticed forms of neuro-linguistic programming is mirroring. And it is mirroring posture when you're with the person, or so on and so forth. But more importantly, mirroring their very words. If you're a salesman, or if you're meeting a person or a girl, what's going on? Oh, he was talking about selling martial arts, right? And if the woman said, "Oh, my fifth grade kid is getting bullied by this person." "Oh, really? Oh, okay, so your fifth grade kid is getting bullied by that person in class." "Yeah. How did you relate to me so well." That simple thing, it seems so like someone's going to notice that you're doing that, first of all, and not think that you're a good communicator, secondly, by way of that. No, actually, that's all they want to hear, is that you're getting them. And if you say something along the lines of, "Oh, so your kid in school is being bothered by another kid," that's not the words that was just used. that may be exactly what is happening, but they won't say, "Oh, he gets me," right?
Right.
And so there's that's the most relatable form of neuro linguistic programming that is usable, and it's not dark, right?
Right.
You're just showing that you're listening to the person. So in fact, NLP, broadly speaking, is not a manipulative concept at all. But so some other briefly, some other little things that are related to NLP. There's one I'm reading, obviously. There's one called anchoring. Create a reliable trigger, touch, or sound or gesture to evoke a desired emotional state or command. Well, that is a kind of a really horrible way of saying that if they have one relationship with Christmas, you might want to bring a different relationship to Christmas instead of that bad uncle that's coming, right?
Right.
And you set that seed where they're of different association. There's all kinds of these. One thing I noticed, or a set of things that I've noticed, modern day politicians using is they'll get accused of just being liars or just communicating lies, but I think it's actually much more purposeful. And they'll get accused of just being ignorant or stupid, but no, they have a really effective, purposeful plan in mind. There's 4 ways that I see politicians doing this dark NLP, if you will, and I'm writing an article about it. It'll be out soon, and that's where I'm getting all this from. There's repetition, right? I mean, we've all heard this before. If you say it enough, people will believe you, right? And so as
That's how you
absurd
create
as
narrative blindness.
say that again.
That's how you create narrative blindness. One of my terms is just, you just keep repeating it long enough, and it may take a couple generations, but don't worry, they won't question it pretty soon. It'll just be the narrative.
Good point. And how trained are we generationally that we don't even realize? We realize how trained collectively we've gotten in different ways and different groups in our own lifetimes. How trained are we by this repetition factor over generations?
We're so trained.
We can only ask.
Micro and the macro, man. We're
Totally.
Look, my experience was pretty simple, dude. When I started walking myself out of narrative blindness, when I was there upon that triangular mound, like I showed you, you know what I'm saying? The first thing I learned when going through this whole shamanic calling process, which began with what people might recognize from AA, right? These 12 steps, much of which depends, the success of that organization depends on what you're hinting on. Identification, right? An alcoholic will not believe that anyone can help him. He'll believe he's the only one that's going through this. And then he hears another alcoholic come along and tell his story, right? And that story sounds a lot like his. And so he's willing to go, you get me, right? What do you do? And I'll give it a shot, right? It's just like that. So it's like what you were describing are many of these good aspects and virtues. Much of what you described, Ethan, sounded to me like just good manners,
Sure.
Look, you're always going to hear my Southern accent, but when I'm here with Ethan and I want to make sure we're talking about the younger dryads, you're going to hear one thing. But when I'm with my buddies, it's what the fuck was that shit? You know what I'm saying? That doesn't make me write anything but a guy that just knows how to get along in different environments, right? Because that's what my life has been. That's what I've sought out. Anyway, getting off track. So I'm just going to throw back to you.
And that's the effective way to communicate, right? You don't talk to 6th graders from New York City the same way you talk to 6th graders from Alabama or adults from anywhere else or whatever. It just
not if you wish to be listened to for any length of time
and communicate your idea effectively, right? They ain't gonna get you even in a spiritual sense. I'm talking more in just a silly human social sense, but people are not going to accept your lessons unless they're ready for them. So yeah, repetition is a big one that politicians have long used. Certainly, absolutism is the other one, and I have four here and a fifth. So it kind of they intermingle, right? They don't necessarily use one of these forms of communicating, these tools, if you will, alone. They go together. But again, I think they're even considered, and that their flim flam is not just flim flam. It's got real reasoning behind it. This absolutist idea, right? It goes right next to the repetition, because you say BS long enough, and then all of a sudden a kid asks, "Hey, wait, he doesn't have clothes. Where are his clothes?" And no one can stand it.
That's it, man.
Uh,
Look, that's it. I remember what I was going to say a minute ago, and you just hit on it with the no clothes, right? Is when I was walking myself out of this narrative, it all began with, first of all, I had to detach from personal narrative, right? Going through that sort of healing process. You know what I mean? I call it shamanic calling, but a lot of people would recognize it that have been through, sort of that AA or any of those steps of turning within, and finding that, right? I'm going through that. And to do that, what do you have to do? You have to learn how to detach from personal narrative, right? The narrative you've had about yourself and your life and everything in it, right? You have to detach from that. Now, a side effect of that, right, was that I learned I could do that too with every fucking thing that was in reality, that was in front of me, right? So you find yourself in this position where you get up to these things like in North Alabama and you're just standing there looking at it, not jumping up and down like you're crazy, not celebratory, just looking at it going, how the fuck did that get there? Right? Let me go in and look at that. It's not any rock. That shit's not natural, right? And you see it and it's easy for you. But then, like you say, that boy points out, hey, fucker ain't got no clothes on, right? What's the first thing that happens? To shut him up, right? And what that impulse is, I don't know. We're probably getting back to Ricardo's thing about chaos at that point. But it's so true. That's why I call it narrative blindness, right? Because there was a time when I would have looked at these same things, man, and probably just glanced right over it because the narrative told me to, right? And I was giving my agency to all of these other things. Once I took my agency back, and once I said, hang on, let me detach and look at it, and I went, well, no, that does not fit with the words you've given me to describe what that is. It just does not,
a great form of observation is noted, laid out exactly in the format that you're describing, in that if you go in, you can do it outdoors and in a city or whatever, looking over a city as well. But they describe it in terms of going, when you enter a room you've never been in, pick out one thing, one microcosmic aspect of the room, notice that, and then notice everything. And then everything, you kind of notice everything from there, or vice versa. Are you the type of person that comes into the room and notices everything? Well, then go to one little thing, and then you start to notice everything. Using that microcosmic and macrocosmic observation. Forgive me if I'm explaining it wrong what you did, but
No,
it
you're
just
not.
sounded like
No,
yeah.
I just
It
think
very much is, man. I mean, you're hitting on something. I mean, when I go in a room I've never been in, I like to. I mean, it's weird, but I like to sit there and try to imagine, like all the people that have come before, in a few seconds, right? And just sort of soak up the experiences that have happened in this stage I'm now on. I think that's so I identify. Those are my words for it, right? Um, I think if I'm following you,
well,
but yeah,
picking up
I
picking up the last thing. I think that's a huge difference between Asian culture and European or American culture, because while in Europe and Americas everybody tries to make things symmetrical. Every neighborhood, the houses must look the same. The newspaper is all organized, right? Because people cannot deal with details. They need big things, big letters, understand what is important to read and what isn't, and so on. And you go to Asia, and every neighborhood, the houses are completely different. The newspapers are made of small articles, all in a mesh. To us looking at the newspaper, it's like a mesh because they can focus on and giving importance to every single thing and observe every single thing as it is instead of what's integrated into. That comes after.
Mm.
Right? Now, the other note that I have here is from what I understand of what you read and what you spoke, Ethan, I would separate them because you said it's completely harmless. It is, as all things are harmless. The problem is how we use them. Because I think on one side, you have empathic people that can use that principle to go to the level of whatever or whomever they are experiencing or talking to, right? On the other side, you have the con people that will use that knowledge of
Right.
understanding
No,
of others.
you're right. I don't mean it's harmless, but it's
No,
in
in
its
itself it
basic
is. In itself it is. It's
in,
innocuous.
in its basic format. It's just not designed necessarily to be
It's
manipulated.
innocuous as
But
it is.
you're right. It is manipulative. Yeah.
So
Good
Absolutely. It
instincts
can
being
be.
manipulated, right, by actors with wrong intentions.
if you try to speak to a child as you would speak to a stubborn 80-year-old man, you would not get
Don't work.
results, right? But
Right.
in the terms of politics, then we go into this con people because every
Hmm.
single word is not
Hmm.
improvised. He has been sought of by a
Very
vast
intentional.
group of
Very
people
intentional.
in order to
Yeah.
write, and they are intentionally vague in order to appeal to the biggest number of persons
Right. That's it. That
possible.
is a good tool. Vagueness. Yep.
And that's dangerous.
And what they use is, for some reason, humans, even if now there was a wave, a nuclear wave going through you, you will grab a child and say it's all right. We have this thing that we need. We once we hear it's all right. I'm here with you. Yeah, but it's still going to fucking hurt, right? It's still
Run.
going to end. But for some reason, just to listen that it's all going to be all right, and that's what politicians add. So it's vagueness, it's generality, and it's all going to be all right. And then we have the other point that you brought, that is absolutism. There is only through me you'll get to this
Yep.
all going to be all right, right? Only this ideology, only this science, only this interpretation, right? And leads people to, we don't require thought, you just require to follow, right? And uh, as a final note that I didn't take here, but I think it's always relatable, is how to control people is to have a higher level of knowledge, of experience, or of consciousness, and be ill intended into control and power. Because if we go to the human sacrifices in South America, we have to kill this amount of people and extract the heart because the sun is going to be eaten by the moon. And if we don't appeal to the gods, the world is going to end. Well, the millions of people or hundreds of thousands of people that are on the terrace looking at the pyramid, they don't have the astronomical knowledge to understand that it's just going to pass by. It's going to enter from one side and come out from the other because they every time it happened, it was told them that it was the end of the world and the gods must be appeased. So when the shaman and is next by the ruler, the king, or
A
whatever he
fucking
is.
murderous priest. There
Yeah,
wasn't no shaman involved with that
yeah,
shit.
okay.
What
I was expecting that. Okay,
fucking psychopathic,
when the
homicidal.
priest is telling people we have to do this and takes the heart out, and suddenly, because it's all constant movement, all of this has to be well timed, right? And the sun starts to appear again, the public truly believes that it was thanks to that sacrifice that the gods were appeased and the sun was allowed to reappear again and the world didn't end.
It's
So
back to
it's not
manipulating that fear of the chaos. As long as you keep them from understanding it's not chaotic, then you can keep them feeling like
exactly.
they're
So
safe.
it's all a matter of knowledge. So we see the systems on what a civilization is built, and that it's different types of knowledge. right? Although most of that knowledge is ignored because we don't even think that it exists. However, everything we consume, everything we watch has been somehow planned to appeal, right? A movie is not a pure thing that comes out of a mind's creation. It's something that was screened to audiences time and again until they realize what people liked and not liked. So where's the art in that, right? Where's the purity in that? It doesn't exist. It's just something that was made to make money. It's not art anymore, right?
Right.
Music, it doesn't matter your talent because we have the tune up or whatever it's called. What matters if it's your image can be sold to the public. It doesn't matter if you
Mhm.
know how to sing, right?
There's a
It's
reason, Ricardo, I always based my favorite bands on who performed live, and you heard about my acting experience. There's a reason I never went past stage, because of everything you just said. Once you remove the immediacy of any creation, whether it's an artist in front of an audience, be it acting or music, right? Once you remove that is your primary concern, that very moment, bringing us back to where God is, to everything we've talked about, right? To being in the now. Once you eliminate that from the product, it's no longer truly artistic. It is, as you say, a product.
Yeah.
yeah. I'm
Well,
sorry
that
to
reminds.
finish in such a grim grim note.
No, that wasn't a grim note. We don't have
No,
to.
no, it's calling out. We all want authentic realness. That's what everyone wants. We don't want auto tune. We don't want fake media creations and caricatures of something that we want. We want the real.
Yeah, we
And,
don't,
and
but the other millions want it.
well,
Well,
but it's the
what the
same.
soul
Those are the
wants,
same
what
people that
the
want to go to
actor,
New York.
right?
Jason and I,
What
we've
they
been
want.
there. We wanted to go to New York. We wanted the pop, more pop, whatever.
Yep.
We were mediated. Um,
Yeah.
Well, look, we live in an age where people think it's possible to be on stage 2 hours, jumping around and doing more exercise than if you are in the insanity workout, right? And still be able to sing. Because if you go, 90% of the people that are there and ask them, do you think you can actually sing while doing that? They will say, yeah, she's doing it.
Right.
Because even if you know that there is this tune up or whatever it is called, it comes into your mind and disappears instantly because you can't absorb the idea that what you're looking at is fake.
Right.
You
You're
can
being
absorb
manipulated.
that the things that you like are the product of technology and not of talent,
Just
right?
like no one can accept their political leaders are all handpicked and acting, 90% of the time. You're right. And that's what these overlords or whatever the fuck they want to be called now, rely on. These, what'd you call them, Ricardo? The slavers,
The slavers.
they rely on that they've learned that if you just present this message and shove it out there enough, people will
Sure.
go,
The
okay.
problem is that creates a lot of good people, a lot of good intended people
Mm,
that ended up working for these systems that actually cause more harm than good, right? But they are believers that they are doing the good work, right? Because they were in their perception led them to believe that what they're doing is actually what
right.
should be done,
Well,
right?
to,
Because
to a large
not
degree, we
everybody is
all have
evil,
been there,
right? So even an SS Nazi torturer, right? It doesn't have to be necessarily evil. I know this is very controversial, but this is just an extreme for you to understand. He might actually believe that he's doing that terrible thing for a good cause,
right.
right? I don't doubt that many of them, and I've known at least one torturer from the Inquisition in Portugal, and he was a bastard. He really enjoyed, and he talked the stories how he thrived on torturing people. He really enjoyed. He took pleasure out of it. But I'm not saying he's the model for all of them. There might be people there doing that because they actually believe that it's a necessary evil. It's something that has to be done, right?
Right.
And there's people like this all over the place, like in NASA, like we are interviewing Brian the other day, and there's not all people in NASA are liars and conspirators. They are just regular people thinking they are
Right.
doing good work,
Right.
right? The problem is they're following a narrative and a perspective that doesn't allow them to see beyond it, because that's what they believe. Like a Muslim believes that Allah is God, or a Christian believes that
Right.
Yahweh is God, and so on. This is all semantics at the end,
Right.
right?
And I think maybe it could fall under, at least on under the third form that I explored here, and it's real simple. It's exaggeration, right? Um, they'll tell you that there's going to be a $1 billion investment, trillions of dollars, unlimited jobs, stuff, percentages that make no sense. The exaggeration of things makes people go, well, all right, it's probably going to be, I'll at least, well, the economy is going to go up 50%. If he's saying 100%, it's going to probably go up at least 50, right? So if they are exaggerative enough, we think that, the truth is somewhere in between always. And it's nowhere near, right? They're just exaggerating into fantasy world. The opposite of that is diminishment, right? Like they'll diminish an idea so much that it's not considered, like energy that doesn't require mine, refine, and sell at a polluting rate, right? Like, no, anything else is impossible. Are you sure about that? And so they'll diminish all these other possibilities that go outside of their either or schism or any
Sorry to interrupt you, but that's
please,
like,
please.
let's go green. So let's create these lithium mines that destroy absolutely everything, including the health of the people that work there.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Let's build solar
is
farms that ruin the soil and spray shit so that the sun doesn't shine.
right, and all the ones that could really work, they diminished, like wave energy and stream, Gulf Stream energy,
murder,
all
fog,
these
cold.
unlimited wind, sun, all these things that are much more sensible in smaller systems and so forth. Any number of things, but no, it's either
Hey,
A
did
or
you hear
B.
that Graham Hancock is a racist? I mean, yeah,
Right.
diminishment. The narrative control, rules of narrative control is what.
Well,
And
that is
describing.
more to put people looking to the other side instead of looking into the person. You start looking at the fact that he's a racist, so you don't even look at the person.
Yeah,
right?
that's what I'm saying. Right.
Because if you talk about
low-hanging fruit for the class of diminishers out there.
if you're going to talk about Ethan to someone and you describe him as the worst human being, when you say, "Oh, I want to introduce this guy Ethan we talked about," do you think the person want to meet him? He doesn't have the experience or the opinion by himself. You just describe them. It's done. It's assumed, right? And extrapolate to that to every single thing in our society. It's all a matter of what you chose to believe without checking for yourself.
That's why you didn't describe Ethan to me this morning, isn't it?
Exactly.
Well, that's why I like to try not to believe, right? And I even make a conscious effort, personally speaking. I don't try to tell like people I'm about to introduce people to. I'm not going to tell them anything. And that's simple. It's you'll meet them.
Right.
Like
I don't even know if I can trust you, because if you don't see through their bullshit, I'm not going to trust you.
Right. Yeah. You want them. Maybe they see something that you don't, like, whatever. Like, or they'll see exactly what you see. You don't got to tell them anything. And it's just best not to set the seed. But yeah, the exaggeration and diminishment, they're really casual, but they're super effective, and they'll often, just like mirroring, they'll go by unnoticed. And the thumb, I call doublethink, right? Because the politicians will set forth in the same sentence or two total opposite ideas that confound so much. It kind of like takes any critical thought to where we're going to form a cohesive question on the lies that they're saying, if you will, or whatever. and dark NLP if you want, but any number of ways you want to put it. Just question the double think or the exaggeration or any number of things, and then they'll put this into context to where it kind of breaks the stream of thought, and then people just move on to the next thing. So like the double think is really effective at just like snapping apart critical thinking on the
it's
present.
creating that chaos that they're pretending exists away from their safety net, right? Because once we look out of their safety net, we realize it's much less chaotic, right? So they got to start throwing that fucking chaos at us to keep us,
Sure.
from looking around.
Look this example. I rarely see shorts on YouTube, but sometimes just for the fun of it or just to spend 5 minutes. And so there is this shorts, and then I saw a few more of those because it's a very interesting phenomenon. There is people are stealing Amazon packages, right, from doors, from what you call it, doorstep, right? And so there are people that are making possibly money on YouTube by filling fake Amazon boxes with explosive buckets of ink. Ink, right? So as soon as the box is picked up, it starts a timer that usually allows them to get to the car, or at least to make a few steps before it explodes. So you can imagine all of the car, all of the people are completely covered in thick ink.
The Amazon lottery was not worth it today. Damn.
Right. And so the fact is, fake or not, I know this is completely possible. That is. Now the strand is that these people that whose boxes exploded in them, they call the police and they present charges because of the ink that they have on them.
This motherfucker owes me for cleaning my car. Damn.
So, and I saw the policeman asking the guy, but why did you come here and pick up the box? And the guy says, I thought it was mine, man. Right? No one asked him, why? Do you live next door, or is it usual for these things to get mixed up? Don't you ring on the bell and ask, oh, I'm sorry, can you check if this is yours? Because I think it's mine. You just take it. How is it possible that these people are even indulged by the police? I would say, shut the fuck up and go and take a bath and don't try it again. Learn your lesson.
In a normal world, anytime someone shows up to a police department covered in any sort of ink, you handcuff them and then ask questions.
Look, the guy entered your property to your doorstep, parked the car on your driveway. First of all, he parks the car on your driveway. He runs into your doorstep where he doesn't know he's being filmed, grabs the box and rushes back to the car when it finally explodes.
Right.
And he still thinks he's entitled to make a claim, to say that he was mistreated, that you can't do this to me. I'm going to sue you.
Tell him to put it in the mailbox and then it's a federal crime.
I'm just pushing this out to see that how disturbed our humanity in these days, that they think that even after committing a clear crime against another people, independent of the law, you're taking something that is not yours from a place that is not your property, and you still think you're entitled to say something about it, right? This is the course that humanity is taking. This is how delusional in entitlement people are getting.
It's a victim society that has been engendered, if you ask me, because all these things we talk about, what does it create? What do the enslavers create? What is this system that has us all in fear so it can make us feel safe from the chaos? What does it create? It creates, no free agency, right? Just a bunch of scared people here.
Yeah, but is this different from the guy that just rose on the subway and killed that Ukrainian girl or whatever it is? Or the people that think to just can kill you because they were somehow entitled by something that happened 20 years ago or 400 years ago?
Natural and desired outcome of the system. I mean, that's what you have to say to yourself, because no, there is no natural, organic, way that what you describe comes about. That's what we're living in,
It's
dude.
like looking.
Victimhood is the product of the matrix,
It's
right?
like
They want
looking.
you to be
Yeah.
constant victims, that they constantly have a solution for you, whether it's medical, whether it's food, whether it's fear, whether it's protection. They want you in that state. And so what do you get? You get somebody that feels they have a right to have their car paid for because they stole a package that exploded on.
Well, it's for instance, it's all about knowledge and experience that people deny themselves. Like watching uh, an Afro American guy defending inclusion and equal rights in society, but having this great ideology keep pushing forward the name of Malcolm X, right? That's telling me you have no idea of what Malcolm X was trying to do. You are idolatrizing a man that wanted exactly the opposite that you are trying to do. Malcolm X wanted to isolate the black community, have their own schools, their own hospitals, everything excluded. He didn't want anything to do with the white people. He wanted to segregate completely the two races. And you have all these people keep saying Malcolm X because we want integrity, we want to be integrated in society and be considered as equals and participate. That's not what the man wanted,
Right.
right? So all of these delusions that I'm going from the ink to this extreme, all of these delusions are all constructed by the system by listening half of the half lies that are given, right? They don't even listen to all of it. It's just a continuous misinterpretation by reading a book, by reading just a word a page, and then you make your own idea at the end, right? It's lack of here and now. It's lack of, yeah, you told me that, let me check for myself, let me look what that is. No one, people don't do that, and that leads us to this following herd mentality, to follow those that keep saying it's all going to be all right, right? That are
Right.
using what Ethan described to turn us into their narrative and accept it because it's absolutistic, it's the only way, and it's going to be all right, and it
Right.
really
It's
resonates with
understandable.
what I want,
It's
right?
understandable, but we're in this revelatory time where we're learning that all of those people that are offering this safety and protection have not only not our best interest, but actually our de-evolution, in mind. So then where are we? Right? I mean, at that point, once you see it's being made obvious to those who you haven't, it hasn't had, right? Yet hasn't yet, that before us constantly we are presented with the obvious fact that all of these control mechanisms do not have our inherent interest at heart. Is all I'm saying. So now how much easier is it? And then what of those that don't, see through it and still buy into it? I think that's kind of where we're at.
Sure, but I think uh, the problem is the easiest solution to have an equalitarian life, to all people have access equal to food, to water, to money,
Mhm.
it would require one earth without countries.
Bullshit.
So we'll have to allow them to proceed to one world government,
Bullshit. See, none of
right?
that's true though.
Right? But the intentions are all wrong because the objective is we are all earthlings. We are not Portuguese or American or Icelandic. We are all earthlings. We are cultures. We have
All
different
you have, right,
cultures,
all
not
you have
different
to have is
countries.
different localized organizations that agree on certain measures regarding the whole. Okay, we have energy over in Sweden now. We saw the article that can be broadcast just like Tesla said through the air. So what happens? Everybody decides, hey, I'll chunk in 10%. Let me go down to my group. Y'all free fucking energy? Yeah, okay, cool. Right. And we all toss in 10%. We've all got free energy, but we're all still also our localized, independent, as you say, culture.
Where do
Or
you see more hunger? In the most fertile continent
where they
on
want
Earth.
most hunger. That's where you see the most
It's
hunger.
it's the most fertile continent on
They
Earth.
want it. Man, I live in Alabama. We've got the Black Belt, right? Known for the most fucking fertile soil on Earth. That's why it's called the Black Belt. It's like, right? I forget how my buddies I used to work with put it, but you could plant a shoe and, up comes a fucking crop, right? Okay. When I look at maps that tell me about where nutrition is the worst and where they are what they call food deserts, so the largest amount of population, usually low income, that has no access to anything outside of like McDonald's or, the processed crap. Okay. I see that those people are in the black belt. Now, the fuck is that? Right? The most fertile agriculturally producing strip of ground on Earth in this part of the hemisphere. I also have my worst food desert. That is the lunacy of what we're talking about, because I have a system that has told people and planted them around these little stores that peddle this created crap we now call food, right? And those people have been told depend on, right? So it's a scarcity mentality. Yet they're walking right past Monsanto's greatest producing cornfield on earth, waving at it as they go and, try to spend their government given money on some processed shit.
Well,
right? Now that doesn't happen naturally.
You have the EU giving all these speeches for ending hunger in the world and this and that. And then we go to the actual laws and impositions that they made to the countries that belong to it. You have the case of Azores, that is considered Portugal. Azores is a major a producer of milk, right? And then the EU decided that they could, for reasons of equality to other members, they could only produce a reduced amount of milk. And so they say, well, the cows have to be milk or they die. So what do you expect us to do with the milk? Throw it into the ocean. So every single day, thousands and thousands of liters of good milk is thrown into the ocean because they could not sell it for EU laws.
Ricardo,
right? They couldn't say, look, no worries, bottle all up, we'll send it to people that need it and give it for free. We even pay you something for it.
Everything. It's the same phenomenon, Ricardo. Why is corn syrup in everything in my grocery store? Right? They don't use sugar. They don't use cane sugar. They use corn syrup. Why? Okay, well, back in the day, the U.S. had an overabundance of corn, had a massive amount of corn, didn't know what to do with. Now, I've supposedly got starving nations around the world. I would have maybe started there, right? Okay, I've got poor people in my own streets in this country that I have this plus. I don't do it. There's no market for it, right? So what do the leaders do? They look for things they can do with the corn. Right? What can I do with this corn? What are byproducts? What the fuck? We've got to have a way to make money. Right? They come up with corn syrup. Now, what do they have to do? Now they've come up with corn syrup. Now we got to corner the fucking market. We got to get some legislators in our pocket. We got to make sure that Heinz tomato ketchup no longer cane sugar. They're using corn syrup on down the line, right? So that I'm being shoved with corn syrup and everything, because in the beginning, I had a surplus that I was not going to lose money on. I was not going to give it away. Okay, that's the same thing, man. It's intentional, right? Now, the guy working at the Coca-Cola plant shoving me poisonous corn syrup, he doesn't do that. No, right? But what happens when he does learn that, right? And that's what's got to happen is people, you can have all the knowledge all day long, but until people start looking at themselves, right? And going, how am I now interacting with all this information? And that's where change comes from.
Jason, we have an unlimited supply of marine salt, and we are digging the biggest mines in the world
salt mine,
to dig mineral salt.
And
that
the
kills
mineral
you.
salt is
kills you.
And the sea salt, exactly. If you
the story of corn in the United States is probably about the most dismal story ever, right? I mean, it used to be used in ritualistic celebrations by the American Indians and valued as a food crop.
Yeah,
it was the staple grain, and now we've genetically modified it to be able to absorb Monsanto juice, and it's all poison. It reminds me of a dynamic that comes up often a false dynamic presented by the powers that be. They try to tell us that the opposite of globalization is nationalization. Are you familiar with this idea,
Yeah,
Ricardo? Am I
yeah,
making
yeah,
sense?
yeah.
Right? Like globalization, if we didn't have globalization, we would have nationalization, and that
Right.
could cause friction and war. But that's not the opposite of
That's the
globalization.
opposite. Yeah.
The
Look at the
opposite,
UK.
well, no, check it out. What about this? The opposite of globalization is not even considered. It's localization. If we had localization,
Yes.
we would have long ago
Yeah.
empowered that black earth of Alabama
Yeah.
to be fruitful
Precisely.
and used. If we had localization, there would be a place that has too much water. It sends water to the place that doesn't have a lot of water but has a lot of X, Y, or Z, so on
Nail
and
on the
so
head.
forth. But they do it in total oligarchical collectivist format, and they
Yep.
screw every little person involved, and they make it globalization. No localization at all. That would empower people, and it would be the
Localization is
opposite.
the future. You couldn't be speaking more clearly and correctly,
Absolutely.
in my
And
opinion.
whether we're forced to be so, or whether we're smart enough to do it ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's an option, you know. I always say just knock out the power for a couple of months, you know. Let's let a solar storm come along.
A couple of
Yeah,
months,
let
everybody will
everybody
kill
get back to
everybody.
baseline reality for a fucking second, you know.
After 3 days, there's nothing in the supermarket without power.
Well, yeah, you know, you definitely hope this could be a planned choice endeavor. Is you know the second is where I was going, like Ethan said, you know, and I think you know with enough like-minded people, as you can already see bubbles happening all over the world, you know, people are going to start to realize this and are realizing this. You know, online groups I'm a part of and
Listen,
associate with, right? Every single one of them, despite their own individual sort of outlooks on life, they all are gearing towards, or you know, in their own way, sort of getting off the dependency of this false system we've got before us.
when we had
And you're
the
right, localization is the key. You know, localization that understands, you know, here's the line: localization that can understand, right, the need to sort of cohabitate with a holistic thing, right? What's going on down here in the black belt, we got handled in the black belt, right? We neither want outside intrusion nor offer it, right?
when we had the blackout in Iberia a few months ago, they immediately transformed it into a social study, because instead of saying to people, "Don't worry, we're going to reestablish connection as soon as possible," and they did. They took 7 hours or 8 hours, but they did. They were telling people in every single radio broadcast, it's going to be up to a week to 2 weeks without power. So
Yeah, yeah,
go to
we were
the
messaging.
supermarket and gather supplies for that time.
Yeah,
So I went to the supermarket. It was barely 2 hours after the blackout. It was empty. And people were flocking so highly they had to limit the access to the interior because there was too many people inside.
yeah,
Right? So people immediately has this drive. There were lines of kilometers to go to the pump stations, and the pump stations weren't operational because there was no power. They were there just to keep their cars there, prepared to sleep there if need be, to put petrol in their cars. Right? It's just completely insane. Absolutely. It's just people are. I used to say a person is intelligent. A group of people are as dumb as a fence post. They are completely ignorant, and they can be driven either from compassion to violence in a split second, because it only needs to one of the sheep to move into that direction, and they all eventually move in that direction. That's why it's so easy to create manifestations and to make them end badly or well, because people will follow. You have these infiltrated agencies that start the violence and everybody goes after. It wasn't the public, it was something that was placed there to start when they want riots. If they don't start, they put these place people there that started and everybody goes after, right?
yeah,
So people are very, unfortunately, human beings are very easy manipulated, because it's fear.
Free will,
basically,
the motherfucker. Right. What do
yeah,
you choose? Yeah. Where do you choose to
it's
place?
fear.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
Ethan,
I
we are
long
almost
I
2 hours.
long said fear is the heart of everything, Ricardo. When I was walking myself, out of where I was and being walked, by God and spirit, right? I was looking for I go looking for the heart of everything bad. I mean, just pick racism, pick, hunger, pick whatever, right? And I swear, every time I try to drill down, and you always end up at fear, once you try to get to the root of that shit in your head, right? Just where does that shit come from in a human? You get to fear, no doubt, bro.
And I like the anagram of fear: false evidence appearing real.
Yeah, I
It's
like
just
I'm
a ride.
fine.
It's just a ride.
How you doing?
Yep.
Fine. Oh, you mean fucked up, insecure, neurotic, and emotionally unstable? Great, got it. Yeah, I learned that one in recovery. Because everybody always asks you how you're doing, and you don't want to tell them, so you go fine. So we just learned to go, okay, great. That means fucked up, insecure, neurotic, and emotionally unstable. With you.
Yeah. Either that or you want to make someone feel comfortable around you, like this count that used to come to the restaurant where I was working. And he said to me on the second day or the first day at the end, he said, and I'm trying to translate it verbally, from this day on, and due to the recent intimacy that came between us, you may start calling by Your Excellency.
what a great new friend.
Reminds me of the line from the ruling class with Peter O'Toole, I think it was, where he was telling the servant to do something in a dismissing way, like, oh, Forbes, go over there and get the car and bring it around. And he just looks at him and says, shall I wash your dick for you now, sir?
Funny.
Anyhow, I'm starting to feel hunger along with all of
Yeah,
these
we,
Yeah,
we
well,
gotta
let's
go.
for
break it up.
localized revolution, which we have brought ourselves around to. And I'll
Yeah,
wrap that up and saying, Ethan, I think you hit the nail on the head. And then I'd be happy to have conversations about the importance of localization with you anytime.
yeah. Well, thank you for coming on. We appreciate you being here, man. That was fun.
Oh, and I
We,
appreciate the offer. It was a great way to spend a couple hours on a Sunday. Really, I really appreciate the offer, man. Look forward to any future
sure.
conversation.
And I'm sorry that Headless couldn't be here with us today. He would like it for sure, and we hope to have him next week. And thank you to Ethan to prepare this, because I can't stream, so Ethan took care of all the technical details. Thank you for that, Ethan.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Cheers, Ethan.
No, you're the man, Ricardo. That was awesome. Jason, great talking with you.
Pleasure,
thank
Ethan.
you very
I look
much.
forward, seriously, to further conversations. It was an honor to meet you today, man. I look forward to more. And anybody else out there that is an independent researcher or like the people you see on your screen, find us at the Institute of Natural Philosophy, because we want to talk to you too.
Absolutely. Thank you,
Right
everybody.
on.
A very fond farewell.
Thanks,
Peace
guys.
on earth.
One day, bro.